I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
For decades, Prince William believed he understood the final lessons his mother had left behind. Then Charles Spencer placed one sealed envelope on a table and changed that certainty forever. Written in Diana's own hand and addressed privately to her eldest son, the letter had never entered palace archives, never appeared in public records, and never been discussed with William. Now, after years of silence, her brother had decided the moment for secrecy was over. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles Spencer had guarded pieces of his sister's private world with a caution palace tradition could never control. At Althorpe, the Spencer family estate where Diana grew up, he met William without aides or advisors. A courtier is a member of the royal household who assists senior royals, but none were present. Charles placed the envelope between them and kept his hand over it for several seconds. William saw the handwriting before his uncle explained anything. His expression changed. The prince did not reach forward immediately. Instead, he asked the question Charles had feared. Why had this been kept from him? The answer came through a private, documented family account Spencer had preserved with the letter. He explained that Diana had written, not as a former Princess of Wales issuing instructions, but as a mother speaking to the son she believed might one day carry the monarchy's heaviest burden. That distinction cut deeper. William had spent much of his life learning how the crown worked, but the crown means the institution of monarchy carried by the sovereign and the family supporting that role. Diana's words spoke about something colder, the danger that duty could become so consuming that the person serving it disappeared beneath expectation. She wrote of loneliness, pressure, loyalty, and the price of becoming strong because weakness felt unsafe. Charles watched his nephew read the opening lines twice. Then he admitted why he had waited. One paragraph deeper in the letter had frightened him, because it spoke directly about the family William might someday build, and the moment when royal duty could collide with the people he loved most. Spencer had feared that handing those words to him too early would become another burden instead of protection. William unfolded the next page, but stopped halfway. His mother was not telling him to escape responsibility. She was warning him never to let responsibility consume his humanity. And when he finally reached the paragraph Charles had feared most, Diana's letter stopped feeling like a memory from the past and became a warning written directly into William's future. The shock was not simply that Diana had written to William. It was that two men who loved her in completely different ways had carried separate pieces of her memory for nearly 3 decades. Charles remembered a sister who feared losing herself inside royal life. William remembered a mother whose absence shaped almost every major chapter that followed. Now those two memories were colliding across one table, and neither man could control what came next. Charles Spencer did not see Diana as a symbol first. To him, she had been his sister long before she became one of the most famous women in the world. He remembered the private fears, the sharp instincts, and the moments when she spoke about royal life without ceremony or performance. The Princess of Wales was the title traditionally given to the wife of the Prince of Wales, but to Charles, that title never erased the person beneath it. William carried a different burden. He could not hear his mother's words only as a grieving son, because every sentence now touched the future he was expected to inherit. The sovereign is the monarch who formally reigns as head of state, and William knew that one day those responsibilities could become his. That knowledge made the letter harder to read, not easier. William reached one passage and read it twice. Then he lowered the page and stared ahead without speaking. Charles did not interrupt him. He already knew the sentence his nephew had reached. Diana had warned him never to confuse emotional silence with strength. The words landed hard because William had spent much of his adult life doing exactly that, controlling his expression, measuring his language, and carrying pain without allowing it to become public. Charles finally admitted what he had feared for years. He worried the letter would become another weight on William's shoulders rather than a source of comfort. William looked back at him and answered quietly that the greater burden had been discovering it existed only now. For the first time since the envelope appeared, hurt sharpened into resentment. William continued reading. Diana wrote repeatedly about protecting the family you build, words written long before Catherine, George, Charlotte, or Louis entered his life. Yet he understood them instantly. His mother had been speaking to a future version of him she would never meet. Then one sentence changed the room completely. Diana warned that if palace expectations ever collided with the emotional safety of his household, William must remember that the crown survives through people, not the other way around. Charles watched the meaning settle across his nephew's face. Then he admitted why he had finally brought the letter forward. A recent private royal conversation had echoed Diana's warning almost exactly. William looked up, and this time his question was immediate. What happened? The letter had remained untouched through weddings, funerals, coronations, scandals, and years of constitutional change. But one fictional conversation at Windsor finally broke Charles Spencer's silence. It lasted less than 20 minutes. No shouting was required. No public announcement followed. Yet when Spencer learned what had been discussed inside that room, he remembered a sentence Diana had written years earlier and understood that the situation she feared had finally arrived at William's door. Charles Spencer had considered giving the letter to William before. Marriage had seemed like one possible moment. Fatherhood had seemed like another. Even the death of Queen Elizabeth had forced him to question whether silence still served Diana's wishes. A coronation, meaning the ceremony in which a monarch is formally crowned, brought the issue even closer. Yet each time, Charles stepped back. The words belonged to her son, not to public history. William's position had changed too. The prince was no longer simply learning royal responsibility from a distance. He was helping shape the future of the monarchy, while also raising George, Charlotte, and Louis. Ceremonial obligations are official public duties tied to royal tradition and state occasions, and those demands increasingly placed fatherhood beside expectation. Every decision about George now carried two meanings: what was best for a child, and what the crown might one day require from an heir. Then Windsor changed everything. Charles had asked William into a private meeting to discuss continuity. The king wanted George to appear more often at major royal occasions, arguing that gradual public exposure would prepare him for the future. William listened until his father finished. Then he closed the folder in front of him and said, calmly but firmly, that George's childhood would not become a constitutional rehearsal simply because public curiosity was growing. The king heard resistance. William heard history repeating itself. To him, the argument sounded dangerously familiar. Royal necessity first, emotional consequences later. Charles believed he was preparing his grandson. The prince feared the institution was beginning to claim pieces of George before the boy was old enough to understand what was being asked of him. William left the meeting controlled but furious. Catherine recognized the tension immediately. He told her he would not allow their children to inherit every pressure that had shaped his own upbringing. She listened, then reminded him that protecting George did not mean rejecting duty. It meant deciding how that duty entered his life. Charles Spencer eventually heard about the exchange through a private family conversation. One phrase stopped him cold. They are children before they are symbols. Diana had written something strikingly similar. That night, Spencer retrieved the envelope and read it again. For the first time, withholding it felt more dangerous than revealing it. And when William next faced his father, he would not arrive alone. Diana's words would be with him. William does not storm into the room. That would have been easier. Instead, he enters quietly, carrying a folded page that immediately changes King Charles's expression. Both men understand whose handwriting it contains. For years, Diana's memory had hovered around their relationship without physically entering it. Now her words are lying between father and son, and the disagreement over George is suddenly connected to wounds neither man has ever completely escaped. William had asked for the meeting to remain private. No courtiers stood between them, because a courtier is a member of the royal household who advises or assists senior royals. He wanted this conversation to happen before titles hardened the room, and before king and heir replaced father and son. The prince made one thing clear immediately. Diana's letter was not constitutional authority. It could not command the monarchy, but it could expose the human cost hidden beneath decisions that looked reasonable on paper. Charles read the copied passage slowly. Then the king removed his glasses and placed them beside the page. He did not speak at once. William watched him carefully, because that silence carried more weight than anger would have. The words had landed. They had reached a place neither man was comfortable naming. Charles finally pushed back. he told William that George's life could not be compared directly with his own childhood. Circumstances had changed. The monarchy had changed. The king argued that an heir could not be prepared for responsibility by pretending that responsibility did not exist. William listened, but the prince heard something beneath those words that made his jaw tighten. William answered that preparation and possession were not the same thing. He remembered adults discussing his destiny before he understood what that destiny would cost. He remembered learning that duty could enter a room before childhood had finished leaving it. Then he pointed to Diana's warning. The institution might someday call pressure preparation, because admitting the personal cost would be far more uncomfortable. Charles went silent again. This time, the king did not reach for an immediate answer. He understood that William was no longer speaking only about George. The future king was talking about himself, about years of expectation, and about wounds he had learned to carry without naming. Charles then asked the question that had been waiting beneath everything else. Had Spencer released the letter to influence a royal decision? William rejected the idea immediately. His uncle had not started a campaign. No political strategy existed. The letter was personal, and the prince would not allow Diana's memory to become a weapon. Yet one question remained. Who decided where George's childhood ended and royal duty began? That question pushed the conflict beyond Diana's words and into the machinery of monarchy itself, where affection mattered deeply, but authority would determine what happened next. A monarchy can survive emotional disagreements. What it cannot survive is uncertainty over authority. Behind William's confrontation with his father lies a much larger struggle. Who decides how the next generation is prepared for the crown? Charles is sovereign. William is George's father. Catherine is his mother. And Diana's letter has suddenly turned an old constitutional reality into an intensely personal battle about where royal obligation ends and parental judgment begins. Charles carried responsibility for continuity, and the king understood that the future of the institution depended on preparing those who would eventually inherit it. William and Catherine carried something different: direct responsibility for George's childhood, stability, and emotional welfare. The sovereign is the reigning monarch, the person who formally holds the crown, but that position did not erase the authority of parents deciding what their child could emotionally handle. William also knew the letter itself had no legal power. Diana's words could not overrule the monarch, change protocol, or dictate royal policy. Their power came from somewhere more difficult to dismiss. They forced the prince to judge whether the choices being made around George were truly necessary, or simply familiar because previous generations had accepted them. Catherine sat with William after the confrontation and waited for him to speak. He did not explain the letter or tell her what conclusion to reach. He simply handed it over. She read slowly, folded the page when she finished, and reached across the table to take his hand. For several seconds, neither of them said anything. Catherine understood the danger immediately. George's future position would always attract attention, expectation, and pressure. Her fear was not responsibility itself. She feared how easily small demands could become normal, until childhood was quietly reorganized around duty. William admitted something harder in return. Part of him felt angry with Diana, not because she had written the warning, but because her words forced open memories he had spent years keeping under control. Catherine then noticed what William had initially missed. Diana was not telling her son to reject monarchy. She was asking him to make it more humane. That difference changed everything. The letter was not an argument for family against crown. It was a warning against believing that protecting one automatically weakened the other. William read the passage again. This time, the meaning settled differently. He could prepare George without surrendering George to expectation. He could respect duty without allowing duty to define every stage of his son's life. So William made his decision. George would continue receiving private preparation, but there would be no sudden increase in ceremonial exposure simply to satisfy demands for visible royal readiness. Catherine supported him, and when Charles learned that William intended to hold that line, Diana's private letter produced its first unmistakable consequence inside the modern monarchy. No proclamation announces the change. There is no palace balcony moment, and no dramatic constitutional statement. Instead, the fallout begins in smaller ways: an altered schedule, a postponed appearance, a conversation abruptly shortened. Yet, inside the royal family, everyone understands what has happened. William has drawn a boundary around George, Charles knows exactly why, and Diana's voice has entered a decision almost 30 years after her death. The silence surrounding it only makes the rupture louder. William instructs his team to scale back plans that would place George at the center of several upcoming royal occasions. Ceremonial duties are official appearances tied to the monarchy's public role, and the prince does not remove them entirely. He slows them down. George will still learn, still attend selected events, still understand what his future may require. But William will decide the pace, not pressure from tradition or public expectation. Charles accepts the change, but the king does not accept how it happened. To him, a painful chapter from the past has suddenly become part of a present decision about continuity. He receives the revised schedule with a short covering note from William, reads it once, then places it beside Diana's copied passage. An aide waits outside for instructions. Charles does not call anyone back. The king feels two wounds at once. As sovereign, he knows his judgment has been challenged. As a father, he knows why. Diana's words drag him back toward a period defined by public blame, private failure, and consequences that followed both him and his sons for years. He does not need William to say it directly. The comparison is already sitting on the table. William feels no victory either. He tells Catherine that defeating his father was never the point. The prince wanted to protect George, not reopen every old wound between himself and Charles. Catherine understands immediately. She reminds him that boundaries can be necessary even when they hurt the people on both sides of them. Then William sends Charles Spencer a private message. "I understand why you gave it to me now." Spencer reads the words more than once. For years, he had questioned whether silence protected Diana's son or deprived him of something he deserved to know. William's message releases part of that fear. But another question follows almost immediately. Did Diana ever explain why the letter had to remain private for so long? Charles does not answer by message. Instead, he tells William there was one verbal instruction, given privately and remembered ever since. Spencer says he will explain it only face to face. No palace staff, no advisors, no royal machinery. The institutional battle has paused. But the most personal revelation is still waiting, and this time, there will be no crown in the room at all. The most important part of Diana's message was never written on the page. It was something she told her brother privately. Do not give William the letter simply because he becomes older. Give it to him when he is forced to choose what kind of royal man he intends to become. Charles Spencer had spent years wondering how he would recognize that moment. After the confrontation over George, he finally knew. Now he must tell William why his mother wanted him to wait. William returned to speak with Charles Spencer without aides, advisors, or palace officials nearby. The prince did not want another institutional conversation. A constitutional advisor is someone who helps senior royals understand the rules and duties surrounding the monarchy, but none were needed here. This was not about procedure. It was about a mother, a son, and a promise one brother had carried for years. Charles explained that Diana had never wanted the letter delivered simply because William reached adulthood. She feared that if he read it too young, he might experience every sentence as another instruction about how to behave. The message was supposed to do the opposite. She wanted her son to receive it only when he had enough life behind him, to understand that trusting his own judgment was not selfish. Then Charles described the private conversation that had stayed with him. Diana had returned from a difficult royal engagement, deeply unsettled, and spoke late into the evening about the cost of always appearing composed. She told her brother that William would one day need someone to remind him that compassion was not weakness, and that refusing unnecessary cruelty did not make a royal less capable. William struggled with that memory. He asked why his mother had seemed so certain that he would face the same pressures. Charles answered carefully. Diana had not predicted the exact conflict over George. She understood something broader. Institutions repeat habits, unless people deliberately change them. And duty can become emotionally merciless when tradition is never questioned. Then William reached the final paragraph again. Diana's message became unexpectedly gentle. She did not ask him to avenge her unhappiness. She told him to learn from it. Love without embarrassment. Protect without bitterness. Serve without surrendering the person beneath the role. William finally understood what he had missed. The letter was not an attack on Charles. It was not a weapon against the monarchy. Diana had explicitly left him a path away from revenge. William admitted that anger had shaped his first reading. Now the prince saw something harder and more important. Breaking a destructive pattern did not require turning everyone inside that pattern into an enemy. Charles watched that realization settle. And Diana's final lesson did something neither man expected. It sent William back toward his father, not for another confrontation, but for the conversation they should have had years ago. Once the existence of Diana's fictional letter becomes publicly known, the reaction moves far beyond palace walls. Britain does not simply debate what she wrote. It debates what she still represents: motherhood, monarchy, loss, rebellion, compassion, and unfinished history. Yet the detail that captures public attention is not a criticism of Charles or a command to William. It is Diana's plea that her son never allow royal duty to erase the human being carrying it. William says nothing publicly at first. Palace communications confirm only that the prince has received a deeply personal family document, and that the full text will remain private. A palace communication is an official statement released on behalf of the royal household, and its restraint matters. The decision protects the original purpose of the letter. Diana wrote to her son, not to the country, and Charles Spencer had never intended to turn that private message into public property. Britain reacts anyway. Discussion quickly shifts toward George and the way William is preparing him for royal life. Some see caution where earlier generations saw obligation. Others see a father refusing to let expectation arrive too early. Then a fictional morning edition of the Daily Chronicle appears, with one headline dominating the front page: Diana's last words to William. Put humanity before the machine. Copies disappear quickly as commuters stop to photograph it. Outside Kensington Palace, the emotion becomes more personal. A small crowd gathers near the gates, where one woman leaves white roses beside a handwritten note containing only 3 words: "He heard you." By evening, broadcasters repeatedly return to that gesture. The debate is no longer only about a letter. It is about whether Diana's influence still shapes the monarchy through the son she left behind. Charles Spencer refuses repeated requests to publish the full document. In a brief fictional recorded statement, he explains that its destination was William, not the public. Spencer's refusal changes the tone immediately. The letter remains powerful precisely because he will not allow Diana's words to become another spectacle. William watches some of the coverage beside Catherine. The prince hears commentators argue that his mother's memory should not influence modern royal decisions, while others defend his right to carry her lessons into his own parenting. Catherine watches him grow increasingly uncomfortable. When the discussion becomes too personal, he turns the television off. William tells her the most important moment has already happened. He finally heard what his mother wanted him to know. But one conversation still remains. The country may have delivered its judgment, yet the verdict that matters most will be spoken quietly, between William and Charles, 2 men who have spent too many years circling the same pain. The final meaning of Diana's letter is not found in the controversy surrounding it. It is found in what William chooses to do after reading the last page. He does not use his mother's words to defeat Charles. He does not publish them, weaponize them, or turn them into a judgment on the past. Instead, he carries them into one final private meeting with his father, and makes a decision that transforms the letter from an old wound into something far more powerful: a boundary and a bridge. William meets Charles again after the public storm has faded. This time, no schedule lies between them, and no argument waits to begin. The prince admits that Diana's letter cannot rewrite their family history. The crown, meaning the institution of monarchy, and the responsibilities carried by the sovereign, cannot be rebuilt by pretending old wounds never happened. But neither can a family survive by allowing those wounds to dictate every decision that follows. William places the original letter back inside its envelope. He tells his father that it will remain private. Charles looks at Diana's handwriting one final time, but does not ask to read the entire message. The king understands something has changed. His son is no longer holding the letter like evidence in an argument. He is holding it like something he has finally understood. William explains that he no longer believes Diana was asking him to choose sides. She wanted him to avoid inheriting the bitterness surrounding her life, along with the responsibilities waiting for him. Charles listens, then admits something equally difficult. Protecting George does not automatically mean rejecting royal duty. The king accepts that preparing a future monarch does not require forcing childhood to move faster. William accepts his own limit too. Protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis cannot become fear of every responsibility connected to their future. Diana's lesson demands balance. Catherine understands that balance, and together she and the prince decide that George will learn gradually, with duty entering his life beside security rather than replacing it. Charles Spencer quietly steps away from the decision. His role was never to control William through Diana's words. It was to deliver what had been entrusted to him. Once that promise is fulfilled, Spencer allows the letter to belong completely to her son. The message changes nothing legally. Emotionally, it changes everything. William finally understands that honoring Diana does not mean continuing her battles. It means refusing to reproduce the pain that shaped them. And that is why Charles Spencer's silence and eventual disclosure matters. Diana's final message becomes neither revenge nor rebellion. It becomes permission to evolve. The letter does not pull William backward into his mother's tragedy. It finally gives him permission to move beyond it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.